Mav's Coffee Clarity with Denise is brought to you in partnership with Drive Media and Consulting and their premier sponsors. Subscribe on your favorite streaming platforms and share. If you just found us, welcome. And if you're a regular, welcome back. Denise DiGrigoli has spent her life in the creative industries as an entrepreneur, helping people transform their visions into thriving businesses, working with individuals and teams to find their purpose and live their life vibrantly. On her pod, Denise delivers business intel and life hacks with wit and wisdom in short shots like a strong espresso with a solid sense of humor. Enjoy this episode of Mav's Coffee Clarity, and here's Mav.
Welcome, my friends. You're on Mav's Coffee Clarity with Denise. We're a show designed to move you forward in work, life, and self-care. And come on, who doesn't need that? Every week, I'm spilling the beans with maverick minds, people that are creatives, entrepreneurs, change makers, that have maved their way through something, share their silver linings after their fiascos with us. It's like one cup, one conversation, coffee with your sharpest friend. If you listen in and you take one thing away that helps you move forward on what you're working on, then we've done our job. So if you want to know more about my consulting services, my strategic communication, and how I can help your business and you and your brand move forward, go to DeniseDiGrigoli.com and check it out. But do it after the show because we have an incredible maverick mind on today, Alex Katz. Now, you guys know I normally do not read the bio, but I got to read it to you today because Alex is an incredible holistic life and behavioral change coach who spent a decade or more helping other people level up using strength-based, process-focused, and trauma-informed approach to wellness. That might be a lot of words, my friends, but think about it. She's been a dynamic educator, called top motivational speaker to watch in 2021. That's right in the middle of the pandemic. She got that award from Yahoo Finance. Beyond that, at UConn, she was Instructor of the Year in 2010 for first-year program instructor. She's helped dozens of people through her education at schools and global audiences where she's been on stage. What I love about her, beyond her being this resilient ninja, is that she aligns with Mav like this. She talks about shredding the should. And you know I say we don't should on ourselves and we don't should on others. So welcome to the program, Alex Katz. Why did I say cat? Come on. Alex Katz.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And it's funny, a lot of people call me Kat for some reason, so we can go with it. Whatever's fine.
I need more coffee today.
Same.
So, in full disclosure, Alex and I were at a networking event in Western Mass, and she was in from Texas telling me about these incredible playgrounds, one that she has right now in Delaware, and one that may be coming to Lee, Massachusetts. And she has this powerful story of transformation through homelessness, food insecurity, which is a very big topic right now in our world. And I saw her and I thought, listen, she's a maverick. And then when I got all her stuff in and I started reading this bio and digging more up about her, I was like, she's just got to come on and tell us the story. Okay, Alex, we are recording.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, and, were you homeless? Were you living in your car?
All good questions. So definitely experienced food and housing insecurity at various points in my life. And I got really into food and housing insecurity advocacy actually in college and grad school and my first professional job. And I realized in that process that I was actually experiencing those things before I realized I was experiencing those things. So, what I thought had happened was, like a lot of college students, I was dealing with food and housing insecurity. But what really had happened, and this is the case with most people, is it started way before then, right? Mm. So growing up, I was in a very unstable household, very physically, emotionally, verbally abusive. And one of the ways that my parents would kind of exercise power over me, or would try to, was through this inconsistency of if I would be allowed home for things as minor as just not getting an A on a test, right? So that was one of the things that they would do. And I remember being in elementary school having this like bag of my prized possessions, which I'm sure at the time was probably like a Barbie and a notebook, or, I don't know, just kind of hanging out my window. I read a lot of books as a kid, like Harry Potter and Harriet the Spy, where I kind of just saw myself as one of these characters and was just, ready to go. But I always had like a go bag, and I always had a bed ready for me in my friend's basement just in case. And then, that was a lot of my childhood where there was this insecurity of like, am I going to be allowed home? Is this safe? And we don't talk enough about that. And students who go to college and then experience food and housing security in college, those are the same students that probably had similar experiences to what I had in childhood, right? And I know this because I've worked with them professionally for many years,
right?
But we don't really recognize it or label it until that point in time,
Food insecurity and homelessness and a chaotic childhood can really, really wreak havoc on your nervous system, your physical health, your emotional health. And I think that, there's a lot of stigma around it. We don't really talk about it. We also don't know to what degree we've had it, right? Some people have had it to a mega degree where they've been really assaulted, and some people have had it to a different degree, but it doesn't matter. I think it's how you process it, right? We can't start to noodle whose trauma is bigger than the next trauma. Trauma just does screwy things. So I find your story amazing because you seem so positive and you seem so driven. Like, where did you get that from? I'm sure you didn't pull it off a cereal box in the grocery store.
Well, I would say definitely reading a lot of books as a kid was great because I was really able to start to look at myself as not only a character in a story, but the protagonist of a story. And, you're reading these books where these characters are all going through something traumatic, and then they're becoming the hero of the story in the process. And so one of the things I was able to do at a really young age was recognize that what was happening in my life, what other people were doing, was just a projection of their own traumas, their own insecurities, everything that they were dealing with. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to grow up and not blame myself for what was happening, which was amazing. And also learning to just really get creative with, okay, well, what's next? Like, this is happening, and how do I move forward? How do I get out of this?
So the stories gave you the tools to see yourself, and also to acknowledge that maybe whatever these people were doing to you really wasn't about you, it was about them. That's a pretty insightful young person. And I'm so thankful that you're sharing this story. Now, what I think is, in social media and with the use of iPhones and whatever kind of phones, I wonder if that skill set is available, or that intuition is available to a young person nowadays. Like, I think it dumbs us down. That's just my personal opinion, right? Like, what made you special? Is it your DNA? Are you intuitive? Was it just because you were reading books? Like, I want the listener who's listening in, whether they've been through this themselves or they know someone else, what made you bite down on that? Because you dealt with a lot as a kid. I mean, we talked a little bit offline before that it was pretty severe in your home. So what made you be able to do what you do? I mean, we're going to talk about all the things you do, but that's a lot.
Yeah, well, I want to go back to something you said earlier about, the trauma comparison piece, right? How like everyone has experienced trauma. I don't think there's a single person who hasn't.
Right.
And it looks different for everyone. And there's traumatic things that I experienced in childhood, there's adulthood, right? And it's all different. And part of why it affects people differently is also what we call protective factors, right? So there's something called adverse childhood experiences that, I've done a lot of work in this area too, working with survivors of trauma in various realms professionally. And adverse childhood experiences it's literally what it sounds like how many experiences in childhood have you had that are traumatic?
Right.
Where are they coming from, right? What does that look like? What stage of development are you in? And then what do you have that's a protective factor? So protective factors are things like access to sports, to mentors, to books. Like, what is it that can help protect you and help build that resilience for you? And so I think for me, I had books, I was a really good student. So, I had great teachers that, liked me a lot. And I think that was a protective factor because it's like, okay, these people that I have at home are telling me I'm horrible, the worst thing on the face of the planet. I was a 3-sport varsity athlete, straight A's, pretty much straight A student, AP classes. So I'm having these people tell me I'm horrible, and then I'm going to school and everybody likes me. Like, at least teachers liked me, right? So
Right.
friends are a different thing, but like teachers like me, and I did have a really close best friend. So these are all, protective factors. I was very athletic as a kid. I loved any sort of sport, and so I think that also gave me something. So I think there's that, and I think there's stuff like Harry Potter, where I grew up, I was that generation where I grew up reading that. And you've got Harry who's like locked in the cabinet under the stairs, right? And then there's me that's like locked in my closet. And I'm like, oh, I see the parallels. And I'm like, what did
There you
Harry
go.
do?
Yes.
Right. And so Harry goes on and like saves Hogwarts and like, does all these things. And I'm not saying I thought I was a wizard, but kind of. I'm
Well,
like,
I
okay,
kind of
well,
think you're a maverick wizard. Yes.
yeah, well, I was like, okay, like he developed these like cool powers through this. And I'm like, what are my powers? And obviously I'm not like waving a wand around, but it was kind of like, okay, what are my strengths? What can I do? And so, for him, it was like, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to go to Hogwarts. And so for me, it was like, okay, like we're going to get through this. We're going to graduate and we're going to go to college. And that was my Hogwarts, right? And I had that also as a protective factor of like, I'm going to work really hard. And I was like 10 years old being like 8 more years and I'm going to go to college, right? So having that to work towards and look towards, I think was super important for me. And just being able to understand like what was actually going on and not internalize it. Cause that's a big thing I've seen working with clients where they really internalize the traumatic things that have happened to them of like, it's my fault. I did something wrong. Yeah. I'm wrong, constantly.
Or I'm not good enough. I'm not good. My clients are, I'm not good enough. Right. I should have. So let's just stop there for a second. When people internalize, what do you tell them to do to release it in their current state? We're post-trauma, but we're still dealing with it. How do you, as a maverick, get people to release that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for everyone. I think your nervous system holds a lot from childhood, and I think it's recognizing like, is this an adult you situation or is this a childhood you situation? And just, making sure that you feel safe and supported. If you're starting this journey as an adult for the first time, I think, like I said, I was really fortunate that as a kid, I was like, okay, this is not about me. But then, you're talking about the trauma comparison piece where I do want to be really careful with people doing that. Like for me, when I was in grad school, I had trouble making friends. And for me, that messed up my mental health way more than anything my parents ever did. Right.
Really?
And so
that's interesting.
Yeah. And, and I've broken my back twice. I've been through tons of other things that like, I would honestly say were more traumatic for me than growing up in an extremely physically abusive household where like I literally started lifting at a young age, learned how to fight as a young age so that I could physically defend myself. And I would say that things that I went through in adulthood affected me much more. And I think part of that is, again, what are your protective factors? What is your mindset? What are you doing? So for example, like, when I turned maybe 26, I would say, I realized my mental health was like not great. And it wasn't anything like people would always assume, oh, okay, it's because this childhood. And it wasn't that. It was
what
like,
was it?
Yeah, it was like lack of friendships, where like I struggled a lot with making friends. It was.
Why do you think you struggled making friends?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do think, there's a couple aspects to it. I think one of them was, I separated from my parents at 18, right? Well, 17, and I went off to college. And I do want to talk about that journey because I know we talked about that earlier, and I think that's really important. And when I separated from them, I went off to college and I was working 80-hour weeks, right? So I wasn't available for like all these parties that people were doing and all these things that were just like normal in college. Talking about my Harry Potter Hogwarts moment, right? As we'll call it, I knew that I was going to separate and go off to college, and that was going to be my escape. And I applied to 63 scholarships to do it. I ended up getting 12. I got my whole first semester covered, maybe even my first year. I was like, cool, we've got it. We did it. Like, good job, pat on the back. And I didn't realize when I got there that it would be shut down. The dorms would be closed for a week over Thanksgiving break, a couple months over winter break, spring break for a week, summer for a few months, right? So I found myself with nowhere to go for the holidays. I wasn't able to get back into my dorm. And so that's where, I had this little like $500 junkyard car named Boris, and I'm like sleeping in the car, I'm crashing on friends' couches. And see, here's a big mindset thing, because I have friends who would let me crash on their couch, but I still felt like I didn't have close friendships, right? And so a lot of this is, again, like, what is your perception of yourself, of your environment, of your situation? But I think I was so stuck in this mindset, like growing up, what was happening wasn't really traumatizing me in the moment. I don't know how to explain it, but I was so set in like, this is my story. I'm the protagonist. I'm the hero. Like, we're just getting out of this. Like, it's fine. And then when I got to college and I didn't have this like major threat in my life anymore, right? That I was just like constantly overcoming, and I was just like a normal human, and I wasn't talking to people about like what had gone on, but they knew something was off because I wasn't leaving for breaks, right? Or I was hiding it, or I'm like, if the people would ask questions about my parents, and I would kind of just like change the subject. And so there was also an element of like, I wasn't fully being authentic with people, and I think they could feel that.
Right. Of course. People can feel that.
Correct. And so I think, as far as that, like, you carry a lot of shame when you're not fully authentic with people. And I think it's hard to have these like deeper relationships when people don't fully know who you are.
Well, I mean, there's a stigma, and I have friends that have had this experience. Not maybe for the reasons you do, but there's a stigma when you don't speak to your parents, right? And no parent ever wants to, well, mostly no parent wants to know their children don't want to speak to them. I mean, it's a real dynamic, right? And so I understand. I have someone very close in my life that doesn't speak to a parent, and it is very traumatizing for both parties. For both parties. I don't know anything about your parents, and then that's not this part of the show.
Said, get out and never come back.
Okay, so they gave you the get out. Yeah,
I got their blessing. But I knew that, right? And I knew for years that was what it was going to be. Was that like, I'm going to get into college, I'm going to leave, and I'm not going to come back, and that's what we both wanted. Like, it was mutual. And I think that's important, because I do think there are a lot of kids these days where, your original question, social media, I think it's good in the sense that like we have reduced a lot of stigma and a lot of shame through social media, where people are like watching these TikToks and saying, oh, okay, somebody else has had this similar experience. And it's giving people a voice to be more open about their own experiences, which I like. But then at the same time, it's also normalizing things that like, your situation is not the same as others. So we talked earlier about cancel culture, right? And what does that look like? And like just cutting people out because they do not agree with you or they do not have the same opinion. And one of the things I've been seeing a lot with this generation is accountability and responsibility being seen as quote unquote abuse, right? Where like we just want to be validated all the time, and validation has a place, and validation is important.
Right.
But as adults, when I'm working with people, I also see where they want to just be validated and they don't want to take accountability or responsibility. And that's seen as an attack when you're trying to ask them to do that, right? And not just like me, but just anyone, I think, in general. And so you see a lot of people cutting out parents because of differing beliefs, or because it's like, oh, it's abusive because they want me to be accountable or they're strict. Well, and I think that's a very different thing.
I think in your work, not only accountable to, you're saying, right, people make these culture cancels out of beliefs, political beliefs, religious beliefs, social beliefs, never mind parental beliefs. Like everything is a reason to cancel someone. And where do we as role models? I always say I role model the behavior I seek, right? I'm trying to help people, be positive when they present and when they communicate and be authentic like you, right? So where do we, as the people we are in society, draw that line with the people we coach? So let's move the ball down the court a little bit. You're in UConn and you are starting all kinds of charitable social programs that help people. I want to hear a little bit about that.
So, to really like understand that, I'll just quickly touch on, so I got there, I got a job my first day of, on campus. Like I got in, I have a dorm, I thought I had a place to live, got a job my first day. I thought I was set. I'm like, okay, we did it. We're on to the sequel now of, the first book is done. This is the sequel, next 4 years. And I didn't realize, like I was saying, the dorm was going to be shut down and I'd have nowhere to live for those periods of time. I didn't have access. Like it was Yukon's farmland, right? At the time, we didn't have.
Oh no, it still is.
It still is, but they at least have like there's shops, there's food. Like if you didn't have a running vehicle, you didn't really have access to anything because the dining halls were shut down. There was nowhere for me to go. And I didn't realize that. And the other thing I didn't realize was that once those scholarships ran out, you need something called the FAFSA, right? You need to fill out the FAFSA for financial aid, whether it's scholarships or loans or whatever. And your parents need to be the one to fill that out. And I didn't have contact with my parents to be able to fill that out, nor did I have parents who would want to fill that out if we did have contact, right? And there's a lot of students that are in this situation. And what I didn't realize was you need proof, right? So to be what's called an independent student, you either needed to have been emancipated, in foster care, parents incarcerated, parents deported, or you need to have proof that there was abuse. But here's the thing, like maybe people are piecing this together as I'm talking. If you were a minor and there was proof of abuse, then you would probably be in the foster care category because DCF would have investigated and hopefully, right? And if you didn't have that, which so many kids don't, right? Where they're like, I was very secretive with things. I didn't talk about it. There was a DCF call when I was younger and like my parents lied and, it was a whole thing, right? So I was never removed from the home. So I'm in this situation where it's like, I'm trying to get support letters and I have my best friend who was able to do it. I wrote like a 6-page graphic in-depth letter of everything that was going on. And then I went back to some teachers that I was really close with who like did not know the full story because I didn't put them in that position, but they knew enough to kind of be like, something was weird here, but they were nervous about writing a letter because, they could have lost their jobs, right? If they knew something and they didn't report. So I had literally nothing. Like I submitted this whole case and for 2 years, it was just like in the, spinning circle of nothing's happening. Everything's frozen because they didn't have enough data. And so then in the meantime, I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm working overnight, loading trucks at FedEx. I'm managing at a dining hall. I'm doing all these things. I'm working all these jobs. My grades were suffering. So it's like this kind of, paradox of like, I'm working to be in school. Yeah, but I'm not like doing well in school. And then I finally decided to be honest with my academic advisor because I wasn't doing well in stats. I couldn't afford the book that I needed. I didn't have the computer. I didn't have access to the computer lab at the time because of my work schedule, and decided to be honest. And I was like, hey, this is what's going on. And the response was, maybe you don't belong in college, which at the time I was like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. But then his solution, he was like, you know what you need? I was in school to be a therapist. I was a psych and Spanish major. And he was like, you need a counseling internship because your grades aren't good enough to get you into grad school to be a therapist. So I was like, okay, we're going to do an unpaid internship, right? Because it was all unpaid at the time.
Yeah, right.
We're going to do an unpaid internship on top of my 3 jobs plus my double major. Cool. Okay, let's do that. Let's figure it out.
What brainiac came up with that idea? I don't know.
I know, right? And so I applied for this peer counseling internship and I went through all these interviews and I got in, but then I wasn't able to register for the course because I still hadn't paid my tuition. I still couldn't do my FAFSA. And so, I'm sitting in class on the first day and the guy who interviewed me, who runs the program, he's like, I remember you. I interviewed you. Why are you not on my roster? And, we talked about stigma. Like at the time I was so afraid to open up to him because like I just opened up to this advisor. I didn't have a great experience. I didn't have a good experience opening up to friends. But he really like metaphorically took me by the hand and was like, nope, we're figuring this out. And basically for the first time in 2 years, my independent status went through. I was able to get financial aid. It was this big pivotal moment for me. And so then fast forward, I was like,
Were you ever afraid? Were you ever afraid?
Of what?
Just pursuing the dream when you got the big shutdown.
No. And I would say I would say the reason why is because I think the way that I grew up was always like, okay, there is, and this leads into my love for obstacle courses, but like there's always going to be an obstacle. I think that we do a disservice to ourselves when we expect life to be easy, right? Like like when I have personal training clients, I'm like, why are you here? If you're expecting it to be easy, why are you working with me? Because if you're not being challenged, you're not growing. And the second that something does become easier, it becomes muscle memory, or we don't have to put in work or effort, which I know is what we want. We just want to be on autopilot all the time. But the second that we do that, we're not creating new neural pathways the way that we are designed to do, right? We're not leveling up our brains the way that we really could be.
So you're saying that when you are presented with challenges, if you take them and you MAV or figure your way out through these obstacles, you create new pathways. And in Mav's world, that's a creative mode. Once you open up a new pathway, you create new problem-solving capabilities, right? Okay. So we're about 24, so I want to make sure we get everything in. So now you're in. You're in Yukon. Take it from there. I want to hear how we get to the playgrounds and why those obstacle courses are changing lives.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm in Yukon, I'm doing all these things. And like we talked about earlier, this was the point where I just felt really alone, right? Like there was no more like, I can't go to this party because my parents didn't let me, right? There's no more like, I am just in survival. Like I was in survival mode with all my jobs, but it was a different kind of survival mode, right?
Right.
And it's really like any college student, I'm figuring out who I am. What do I like? Like I didn't have any normal childhood experiences. I couldn't relate to people over like concerts and all these other things. So I'm out here
like
just
you didn't go to Disney World.
Well, it's Disney. No, I'm just kidding. But like, right. I didn't do any of that. And it was, difficult. Like making friendships was difficult. There's this big element of shame where I'm hiding things. And I remember sitting in the library one day and I'm watching this group of friends. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking like, ugh, why can't that be me?
Right.
And I had this moment of like, hold on, what are you doing? Switch your tone. Like, why are you talking to yourself like that? And so instead of like, ugh, why can't that be me? I switched it and I'm like, why can't that be me? Right? We have full control in our stories of deciding how we want to be as the character. And like, yeah, you don't always just flip a switch and become that character. You got to put in work for it sometimes, right? Like you said, there's trauma and things that we work through.
Well, I'm a firm believer, and we do align on this, right? It's a thought, and a thought can be changed. So correct. The two greatest words in my book are I am. Whatever you say after that, you are, right? And all of us feel like, or not all of us, I don't want to have any generalities, but many of us feel like I'm not good enough. I should be over there. I should be over there. So what I say to myself and to the people I work with is, you get to choose. And building that memory, that muscle memory, is the challenge, right? So how did you do that? How did you change your tone?
Yeah, honestly, I think the first step was just being tired of the narrative that I was living in, right? Like I had to recognize that the thoughts that I was having, the narrative I was living in, it wasn't serving me. It wasn't who I wanted to be. And to your point, like, yeah, we get to choose who we want to be. And maybe that takes some work on retraining your thoughts or your nervous system or your brain, sure. But like your emotions literally follow your thoughts, and you can say the same words, but you say them with a different tone, and that impacts your nervous system. It impacts how your body and your brain are perceiving it. I do a lot of corporate talks on burnout these days. And literally one of the things, and it's preventing burnout, not recovering from it, but preventing it. And I have this little like burnt toast diagram, but I talk about this because what we like to do is we like to blame external factors like our boss, the workload, all of these things. But what research actually shows is that your perception of a situation or perception of the task and your ability to handle said task or event is going to cause the HPA axis in your brain to release all of the stress hormones and chemicals and all of the things that then jack up your nervous system and make you less able to physically handle it, literally just based on your perception. So it's not about how many balls you're juggling, what balls you're juggling. It's a lot of your perception of your ability to handle juggling them.
We know that you get 70,000 random thoughts a day, and I call them many ants, automatic negative thoughts. And to your point, Henry Ford would say, if you think you can do a thing, you can. And if you think you can't do a thing, you can, right? That self-talk is critical. So we know you're coming from a, lack of a better word, pretty crazy background. You're motivated. You found yourself in this book. You've got your own tools. And these tools you're sharing, you're changing your tone, and you're bringing in the lack of, I'm not going to should on myself. Now, where are we?
Yeah, for sure. So, actually the shooting, like I didn't even get there until my mid-20s, right? So that just shows you like how
well, you don't even look more
this...
than mid-20s right now, but we're not going to ask you to say, your age.
I'm in my 30s. It's okay. I'll say it.
You're doing good.
But at this time I was like 19, 20, 21, like, kind of really struggling with that. And at the time too, like I was dealing with the housing and food insecurity. I broke my back. Like there were all these things that were going on where it's just like, why me? And it's like, well, why not me? Like maybe it's me because I can handle it and I can work through it and then I can be something for other people. So fast forward, I ended up starting the support group in college for other students that experiencing independent status because I knew there had to be more and we just weren't talking about it. Turns out there was this girl that I was in psych class with my freshman year. She actually felt so alone that she dropped out of school because of it. And then seeing me graduate actually inspired her to come back and to get her PhD, right? So that's the power of talking about things and realizing you're not alone and also like having that guidance. Fast forward, I ended up kind of starting a nonprofit, starting a support program for other students that were experiencing these kinds of issues, family estrangement, food and housing and all of that. I was working at the university running a college access program for youth in the foster care system, and I was coaching at 2 gyms and really just, doing my best to help others through whatever situation they were going through. And then COVID happened and I lost all 3 jobs. And I was like, okay, same thing. Like, what are we going to do? And somebody that I know who also does a lot of speaking, I heard him say once, the difference between you and the person that you want to be is that the person you want to be acts boldly consistently. And I was like, ooh, I like that. We're gonna take that. So, you might not have it figured out. You might not know what that next move is, but you're going to act boldly consistently. And I remembered being like, okay, what are we going to do? What's the next move? And within 2 weeks, I ended up starting a business because I was like, okay, I have all these skills. I have all these certifications. People are struggling. I can help them. Let me help them. So went all in on myself, started a full-time coaching, consulting, and speaking business, went all in on Neighborhood Ninjas, which is the nonprofit we'll talk more about, moved across the country to Austin, Texas, because I was just done with the snow, like quarantining in the snow.
But how did you pick Austin, Texas? I was just in Texas this year. It was actually quite nice. Very different than I thought it would be. But how did you pick that? Because you're a New England girl.
I am a New England girl. We have a lot of perceptions in New England about Texas. And then once you actually come to Austin, you're like, oh, that's not what everyone's been saying about it. But so if you haven't been here, come on down, y'all, and see what it's like. But honestly, I don't know. I kind of had a vision for myself of what I wanted my life to look like. And Austin kind of just matched that. People here are super friendly, super entrepreneurial, very health conscious, health focused. You can be outside most of the year. Everybody loves nature. They love dogs. We can rent a house with a big yard for cheaper than, we could rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Connecticut. And so I really I journaled it out and I was like, what do I want my life to look like?
Woman after my own heart with journaling, because I have a book called The Daily Drive, an agenda for your mind, body, spirit, and lifestyle, where we journal and manifest.
Exactly. So I put the vision out there of like, what do I want my life to look like? And it matched. And, we moved and it was the best decision. But I remember at the time, everybody was like, oh my God, no, you can't start a business. Like you need stability. You should, you've been on this path, you got your master's. And it was a lot of should shaming of like, I was doing really well. Like I was doing research, I was publishing things, I was speaking, And it's like, you should stay on this path. And I'm like, but one, I wasn't happy, right? I think
Mm.
happiness is important, it needs to drive your life. And two, I didn't have stability, right? I had consistency. I knew that I was consistently getting paid every
Yes.
2 weeks, and I knew that I consistently needed to work two other jobs on top of my main job to be able to just barely pay my bills, living paycheck to paycheck. And that for me wasn't stability. And
Mm.
so again, like I took matters into my own hands and I'm like, okay, what is the point? What do I want my life to look like? How do I want to impact people? And so, and it was a hard decision for me because when I graduated college, the job that I had at UConn, it was the only one like it in the state. And I was like, this was my life's purpose, my life's mission at the time. And I was like, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to go to grad school to get this job. Everything I did for
Yes.
like 5 or 6 years leading up to it was to have that job. And then once I had it, I was like, I would have stayed.
What
I
was
think
the
had
job?
like
I missed that. What was the job that you
I
worked
ran a
toward?
college access program for youth in the high school foster care system. So I had students from all over
Okay.
the state, and they lived with me on campus for the whole summer. We did extracurricular programming, we did stuff during the school year, and it was great. And then I also started a caseload of like 300 other students that at the university that were also independent students and going through like what I had been going through. And it's like I took all this trauma, right, and I turned it into my purpose. And I was like, hey, this is the way that we're doing it.
Right?
And I realized that that wasn't it. That wasn't, it didn't need to be that. And like I was able to impact so many students, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I had, and I love them so much. But like I wasn't centering myself in doing that work. There were other ways to create an impact with the same
Mm.
um, groups of students in different ways. And that's kind of how I got to neighborhood ninjas in my business now.
I just did an episode, I don't know, 1 or 2 weeks ago talking about sense of purpose. And what I'm finding with my clients is, and it sounds like you, like we give ourselves a sense of purpose in this direction, in this goal or whatever. And then we get there and we're like, yeah, okay, did it, been there, done that. And what I say to everyone is like, sense of purpose, it's okay to make it even daily or edit it, right? So you edited
Mhm.
your sense of purpose because you had achieved that work and you had helped the people. And I think it probably informed Ninja Playgrounds.
Yeah, I think pivoting is so important. Like I think that we are not the same person throughout our lives. Like
Good
pick, like
point.
I'm not the same person this week as I was last week. I'm for sure not the same person today as I was 5 years ago.
Right.
And I think a lot of times we do let, things that we've been through in an attempt to make sense of it and try to impact people, we do it in a way that just kind of puts our lives on hold, if that makes sense. Like we're not serving
Well,
from.
for me, I hang on too long. I think, I love my ideas. I want to see them through and then I get all the way through like baking a cake. And I'm like, do I need to put that extra set of sprinkles on there to make it super good?
Right.
And so I am so glad you're sharing this because it's okay to edit and pivot and evolve. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about the playgrounds and what's happening there. I know you have one in Delaware. I
Yeah.
love the fact that they're obstacle courses. Me, myself, growing up as an asthmatic child that was restricted from exercise because I'd be hospitalized, was always the chubby girl that no one picked on the dodgeball team and was always having asthma attacks. And when I stopped believing that, because I had somebody that was really near and dear to my heart, mentoring me and supporting me, like you probably do to your clients and the kids you help, I learned to ski at 47.
That's awesome.
I rode my first road cycle triathlon with all of my cousins younger than me at 50. And I paddleboard yoga and aerial yoga for the first time at 53. And we're not going to go beyond that age for Mav today. So I love this. I'm going to be doing the obstacle course in Lee. So let's hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think that was kind of my big pivot, right? Like I pivoted into the business. I'm coaching, I'm consulting, I'm speaking, I'm doing all these things. I'm getting these awards. It was great. And then
Well, let's not pass
just,
over your awards. Your awards were Teacher of the
so-
Year, Professor
yeah,
of
so
the...
first year programs at the University of Connecticut. So one of the things I was doing is helping incoming students with their transition. So it's actually going to kind of segue into this of, helping them with, okay, how do we overcome obstacles, right? Like you're coming in as a college student and you don't know what you don't know. And how do you shift your mindset to deal with things that are stressful or traumatic, or like, what are we doing, right? In real time. And then I was speaking to schools and to companies, and, we talked about like the burnout prevention stuff and how do we work through that. So I was doing that and it was great. And I was working with clients all over the world and I loved it. I'm helping them with behavior change and personal training and improving their health and doing all this stuff. And at the same time, we're doing Neighborhood Ninjas. So Neighborhood Ninjas, it's a Ninja Warrior based nonprofit. When I was working at the university, I was still running Neighborhood Ninjas. We started as a scholarship and mentorship program, and we were trying to teach these very topics through obstacle-based programming. We were doing a lot of work with youth in the foster care system. We've done work with youth in juvenile justice programs. And for us, it's like, okay, obstacle-based programming, I got into Ninja Warrior because I had a fear of heights and water. And what I quickly learned with it, I was a great athlete in all these other sports. Like I was doing Spartan race super competitively. I was powerlifting. I was, a track athlete in high school. And what I quickly learned is I sucked at ninja, right? And because I had all these mindset blocks, and that's okay. And it's like putting yourself in a position where you're going to fall so many times before you get something. Just like when I went to college and I knew, okay, I'm applying to these 63 scholarships. How many no's am I going to let myself get and continue going? Like, how badly do I want this? And what can you learn along the way from each no or each time you fall off of something? And
it's kind of like failing forward, right?
Failing forward, yep. And one of the things that I see a lot with students is like, if they don't do well on a math test, what's the immediate thing that they say?
I suck.
Right, I suck at math. But what if instead of looking at your abilities or your outcome, you could switch focus to your process, right? So typically with a math test, there's like one concept that they missed, and now they're missing that in like 5 other questions, and that's why they didn't do well on the test. But we're so trained to immediately be like, I suck, and not be able to reframe that, not be able to put that into actionable steps that we can pivot and change our mindset. And so that's one of the things we do with obstacles. And then we translate that back into like, okay, you just had this issue with a friend, or okay, you just had this happen in math class. And what did we learn here? How do we focus on our strengths? How do we focus on our process? How do we reframe things in real time to be able to work through these stressors, to work through transitions, situations where we don't know what we're doing. A lot of times with kids too, it's like, I'm confident unless someone's watching me, right? How do we work through all of that? Because all of that transfers into every other aspect of your life. And we learn 4 times faster through play, right? So now I'm taking all of these things that for years I was trying to teach clients or work on with students, and we're actually doing it through a really fun obstacle-based program that is also improving people's health. Like if you look at the playground, if you see this video, the playground behind me, it's adult size. It's 12 feet high, right? So it's something where...
I was going to ask, so it's 12 feet high. How big is the overall playground?
Just like 124 feet long, just a little big. So it's big. And, feedback we hear from moms especially is that they were going to the little kid playground with their little kids, and their kids were just playing on whatever it was, and they're just watching them, right? And now we've created something where the whole family can be active together. And we're also creating free community programs, classes. We've done a ton of it in Delaware. And what we're seeing is that, like, take moms, for example, we're doing moms classes. We're seeing their confidence and self-talk improve in real time. And then what we're hearing from them is that they're taking a lot of what we've taught them, and it's changing how they parent. It's changing how they help their kids reframe or work through their self-talk in real time. And the kids are watching their moms do these obstacles where they're not sure what they're doing, and they're getting better incrementally. Like maybe they're getting one move further every time, and they're watching them figure it out. They're watching how they talk to themselves. They're watching them use their unique strengths to do it, and it's really cool.
So what I'm hearing from you is that obstacle training, or your playgrounds, of course, help open doors and create new creative pathways in the mind. And that solution, or that problem solution orientedness that happens on the playground translates in so many other areas. Now, I know you're bringing one to Lee, Massachusetts, Western Mass. As we're wrapping up here, tell me a little bit about that. I think you're fundraising for that, and I think you have a vision for that. I'd love to hear about that before we jump, and then I'm going to have one last question.
Yeah, absolutely. So we built the one in Delaware in 2024. We've done dozens of free community classes, competitions, programs. We've worked with youth in the juvenile justice system, youth in foster care.
Are you running the programs or someone else?
Myself and a couple of our board members who actually live out in the area.
Okay.
And we've been doing that, since 2024, over a full year now. And obviously we're putting stuff on social media because that's the world we live in. And the town of Lee saw this and they were like, wait, this is incredible. We want this for the Berkshires, and actually requested for us to come in and build this playground there. And obviously we're going to be doing a lot of the same programming that I mentioned in Delaware, but even without the programming, the playground itself, the thing I really want to emphasize is that this is good for people of all ages. Like, our goal is to create something where teens have a safe and productive place that they can go after school to build connection, be less isolated, be off their phones, be active. That local schools are already planning on using this for after school programming as well. This is something where whole families can go together. We can work with seniors. We can
I
work
love
with
the
moms.
seniors aspect. I think it's so important.
Ginny McCall, she's part of our team. She's 73. She didn't learn how to do her first pull-up till she was 68. And I always tell that story
Ginny.
because I know, right? I always tell that story because people, again, it's the mindset. People are always like, I'm too old, I'm too whatever, right? And once we break out of that, possibilities are endless. And so this playground is something that I think is going to increase tourism to the area even more. In Delaware, we've seen people coming from out of state just to use this, let alone for our large competitions and other events that we do.
Where can we find you? Just let us hear the website.
Yeah, so neighborhoodninjas.org is our website.
Take a pause. Neighborhoodninjas.org, my friends. And we're going to put this up on our socials as well. And your Instagram is?
A neighborhood_ninjas, which is the place that I would recommend you go, because that way you can see footage of all of our events and classes and things that we're doing in real time.
I want you guys to stay connected to Alex Katz, not Cat, Alex Katz, because she is an incredible maverick, maving her way through trials, tribulations, finding those silver linings, and somebody that's helping the community. Come on, my friends. I hope you picked up one thing today. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your favorite pods. Why? Because together, one cup, one conversation, we move everybody forward. One last question for Alex. What's the one life hack you swear by that no one would get?
I would say make everything play.
Make everything play, my friends. That is it from Mav's Coffee Clarity. Peace out. Alex and Mav have got to get back to work. Thank you, my friend Alex. So good to have you on the show today. All right, we'll be seeing you next week. Oh, I forgot to say, like, share. Please like and share. We like and share you. Take care, my friends.